All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa. And with us today, a very special guest, someone who has been a friend of the show and the podcast for, you can say, her entire life. My sister, Lisa Ulloa. Welcome.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you here.
I just like to be included.
We have that in common.
Yeah. It's an
They
Ulloa
pitched
thing.
the idea of you being on here, and I was like, oh, she was good on Geekmore. Let's see what she can do here, I guess. So.
Oh my God, you guys.
Yeah. So Daniel had this idea, and I think it's a great idea, of doing something specifically for International Women's Day.
Yes.
And,
so yesterday was actually International Women's Day. But you know,
we're a day late and $1 short. But you know what? I think it's the effort that counts.
Right.
Because we're not going to change our schedule for anyone. Right.
Right.
You know, we go out on Wednesdays.
Go.
You know, we go out on Wednesdays, but you know, every day should be International Women's Day. So let's celebrate it today.
There we go.
And invited a girl.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think I saw on my planner that it's also like, I think that like just March has now become like International Women's Month as well. So we're still right in there.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
the whole
good.
month. Yeah, it was about time they gave us a month. So yeah.
Well, Lisa is actually on the diversity and inclusion team at her company. So so this is like something that's like near and dear to her heart. You know, this idea of celebrating, you know, all people, all cultures, genders, sexes, and all that. So I, for one, think it's fantastic to have a movie like this that definitely does celebrate the female characters in movies and in horror movies in particular, especially where, you know, some of these stereotypes are definitely not great. You know, you have to look back on some of these movies with you know, rose-colored glasses and
absolutely.
You know, okay, you know, I'm watching it as if it came out in the 1980s, and you know, there's no problem here. I'm just kind of enjoying it for what it is, sort of thing. So this movie in particular, The Final Girls, right? Daniel, you had not seen this.
I had not seen this. No, this was my first viewing of it. And like what was interesting was I was texting you like right at the beginning of getting started, because I was under the impression that basically, like, you know, when it started and it was showing the trailer for Camp Bloodbath or whatever, I was like, oh, weird, like that's a movie in the movie. I thought that was like the whole thing. So then I was trying to figure out what was going to happen, and then all of a sudden, you know, they end up in the movie, and I was like, there's so much happening already, and it was weird. It was a very weird ride at the front, but once I kind of figured out what I was doing, I strapped in, I was ready. So yeah, this was my first viewing.
That's awesome. I love it when I get to introduce you to something. This is something that I had talked up a bit every now and then. Neri and I, who used to do this podcast with us, now I guess occasionally may do the podcast with us. Possibly. Yeah. Woo Bro is going on at the same time as we do this, so it's hard for him to come on. But you can catch us with him on Mount Geekmore, another Geek Bro Network podcast. He and I are big fans of this movie. And I remember when this trailer dropped back in like 2014 or 2015 or something like that. And I was really excited to go see it. And then I didn't see it because I missed the release. Like, it was released to very little fanfare. and then I didn't get around to it until about 2017 or 2018. Lisa, do you remember anything about
Yeah, I mean,
this?
I remember specifically Dave telling me, "Oh my god, Lisa, you have to watch this movie. It is like so up your alley. You're gonna love it." And so I was like, "Oh yeah, David, I'll get around to it." Because if anybody knows David, he has hundreds of movies that he always wants to recommend, and there are just not enough time to watch it. So I was like, yeah, totally, totally. And I don't remember, it was a random night. I was at home, and our other sister, Teresa, she and I were looking for something to watch. I was like, David keeps telling us to watch this movie. Let's just watch it. And I was very pleasantly surprised. That was the first time that I watched it. It was all because of David. So, yeah.
You're talking about just very little bit of fanfare. I don't even remember this movie ever being in theaters. Like, this is a movie I only learned about from you and Neri, actually, in the past couple years. I had actually never even heard of this until very recently. I was shocked to find out it came out in 2015, and I'd gone this long, or even 2 years ago, gone that long, not even knowing it existed.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones, and it's odd because when something is good, and I think that this is a really good movie, and we'll get into that in a little bit. When something is good, people like talk about it, and word of mouth, kind of spreads this thing. So anything I hear about this movie from the people who have seen it is only like stellar, glowing reviews. So that tells me something. There is something like innate, something in this movie that speaks to people. It just didn't get that sort of wide release that would have allowed it to speak to more people, unfortunately.
And it's interesting because the cast is pretty, it's not like, A-list people, but it's got a good cast also, so I was really surprised that it didn't have such a wider, marketing done for it, because it does have some good names in it too. So
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with all of the names that I saw, like, when this started, because like, just from looking at it at the beginning, I was like, wait a minute, like, I know some of these names. It took a second for some of them to click, and then I was like, oh yeah, it's the girl from American Horror Story. And then
Yeah.
and then you start putting these things together, and I was like, okay, yeah, like, I'm ready for this. Which, by the way, in all of these years of knowing both of their names, like knowing that they had the same last name, it never occurred to me that the girl from American Horror Story that's in this is sisters with the chick who plays Lorraine Warren in the Conjuring series.
You hadn't realized that before?
I knew, but I knew they had the same
well,
last
it's
name.
because
I
they
just
have
never put
such
it
a
together.
large age difference. I mean, and it's really not even that large. I mean, you think of, David, me, and our younger brother, and it's basically even, that's a wider gap than us with our younger brother. But yeah, so you don't think that they're related, but they totally are. They're sisters. So Vera, I think, is the oldest one, and she's the youngest one. So I think that's why there's such an age gap between them.
Yeah,
and they actually both exist in the Conjuring universe, because Thaisa was in The Nun.
In The Nun, yeah. And like that, and that's, yeah, then I started putting all these things together, and I was like, this is crazy. Also, I've just for years been calling her Teresa because I just never paid that much attention to how it's spelled. So just now hearing you say Thaisa, I'm like, yep, been pronouncing that wrong until this very moment.
Well, I think it's either Thaisa or Taysa.
No, it's Thaisa.
I thought it was Thaisa. Yeah.
What it's definitely not is Teresa.
It's not.
It is not Teresa.
No.
You are correct about that. You are right about being wrong. So this movie is, I want to say, somewhat unique, because it's not entirely unique. This idea of getting sucked into a movie and using your knowledge of the tropes, because really when you stop and think about it, this was done about 20 years before in a movie I absolutely love and doesn't get enough credit, a little Arnold Schwarzenegger flick called Last Action Hero.
Yep.
Right?
In reverse, right? Because it's like he gets pulled out of the movie.
Both things happen.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Because the magic movie ticket sucks the boy into the movie,
and
then he and Schwarzenegger get spit out together.
It's been a long time since I've seen that one.
And that's the thing. Last Action Hero doesn't get the respect it deserves, I think, because since it is a satire and it is a spoof, it's kind of easy to overlook it and look at the things that it does ape on. So go back to those other Schwarzenegger movies that it's satirizing. So this does that same thing, but I think it does it um, in a better way. And it's something intangible. It's hard to describe why I think this is better and handles the concept better than Last Action Hero does. But there is something really interesting here because you have homage and satire happening at exactly the same time. So what are your overall thoughts? We'll get a little bit more specific as the show goes on, but what are your overall thoughts on the movie and how this homage and satire work together to create something that's pretty unique? Lisa?
Great. Since it is International Women's Month, I will go first. Um, so I think it does a really good job of balancing the two. Like honestly, I think that it plays homage when it needs to. Like it has that honor to the classics, but then there's also the ridiculous satire at certain times, and there's the good balance of the two, where I think that's that intangible thing that you're talking about, Dave. Like, what is it? And it's because it does the balance so well that you can't put your finger on, oh, it's this, it's this. You can't really place it. It's funny, it's emotional, it's slashery. So it's all of these different things. And I think that's why you can't put your finger on what exactly it is that sets it apart from everything else. It's just really done well in the sense of, yeah, I'm going to be all of these things and I'm going to do it well.
I think when you're looking at this movie and you're looking at the homage satire aspect of it, to say unique, I think is a little bit of a stretch. I think it's just it's a step further than some of the things that have come before it, right? Like Scream was satirical and an homage. Wes Craven's New Nightmare, satirical and an homage. But what this does is it takes those to another level. So I don't know, like I didn't think the word unique necessarily, but I do think it is kind of in a class of its own. Just in this realm of these other things. I thought it was a pretty good movie. There were some definite faults here that I'll get to as we get into it, but overall, those few faults I don't think outweighed the fact that what we got here was funny for all the right reasons. It wasn't super scary, but it was definitely slashery, right? And so you got all of these things kind of thrown in there. But what was really cool in the satire aspect of it was it didn't just do the things that it was going to make fun of. It like did the things and then addressed them, which I thought was really great. I loved when the one dude basically like just grabs Adam Devine by the back of the head for dropping that F-bomb, right? And like and he's just and he like just reams him just like right there. And it's like, okay, cool. So now that guy is fully aware of the fact that that's not an okay word to use. And so you're talking about how you go back and you watch these things, through the lens. And that's what you always have to do. You go back and you watch 80s slashers, you got to do that. You go that rash of early 2000s sex comedies, right? Like those things are hard to watch sometimes unless you just
they did not age well.
No. But if you just turn your brain off and you kind of watch it through that lens, okay, fine, I'll give you that. What was interesting here was instead of just using the angle of satire to beat a dead horse of some of these jokes that were huge in the 80s, they addressed them head on and brought up the fact that, you can be more than just the what is it, the nerdy
shy girl with the guitar.
Clipboard. The shy girl with the guitar and the clipboard. Like, and so instead of just making a movie and calling it an homage so they could do those things, they address the fact that movies could be better than that. And that was what I think kind of put this above some of the other satirical stuff.
Yeah, they're super self-aware, which I loved it. And they call you out on it. And it's almost like all they're missing is, Ferris Bueller looking at the camera being like, hey, this is to you.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Or what from Don't Be a Menace to South Central, like Damon Wayans just walking by, or Keenan Ivory Wayans just walking by the window. Message.
This movie came out at a time where I think Wes Craven had kind of set the standard for what metafictional horror was. He had come out with that Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Scream, all these things kind of address this idea that the people within this movie understand what a horror movie is and know that horror movies exist, and they know what the tropes are, and they know subsequently how to behave. So when that gets pushed a step further, you start seeing in right around this time, movies like this start coming out, which take this idea of metafictional horror even further. So movies like was it Leslie Vernon, the rise of
the rise and fall of Leslie Vernon.
yeah.
Oh.
It's I only saw it the one time, but I was like,
Mask.
man, Behind the Mask, that's what I call it. Yeah, Behind the Mask, the rise of Leslie Vernon. A movie where serial killers exist in this world and people seek out to become serial killers. And
yes,
this is
like honored.
Yeah, it's like a documentary crew documenting this guy becoming a serial killer. It's such an interesting concept, having the movie world exist in this real world, right? I think this kind of takes that and again goes a step further, which is that same step that The Last Action Hero took. So you're right in that it's not really unique. What I think is unique is how well it's done.
Now that I agree with,
and how diverse it is, because this is often called a comedy / horror, or a horror / comedy, but there's so much more. There's lots of drama in this, and I have yet to watch this movie. I've seen it a handful of times now, and I've yet to watch this movie without crying at some point in it, because it does speak to a very human part of your horror brain. Yes. that everyone can get on board with.
Well, and if I could cross the streams here into something else that's a big part of my life, in wrestling, there's a term that's mark. It's a mark is just a big fan of wrestling, right? Like if you're a mark, then you always buy into what they're telling you. If they tell you somebody's got a broken ankle because of this, you just believe them. That type of thing. It comes from the old Carney use of mark for the people that you're going to pick out to get their money from. So in the wrestling community, that idea of being a mark, we wear that as a badge of honor. And then you have you have another group of people who refer to themselves as smart marks or smarks, right? And they're the people who are so inside wrestling that they know everything that's going on and they're seeing it from all angles at one time. Those people usually kind of generally assholes, but like anybody who refers to themselves as a smart mark, it's like, probably we don't have a lot in common when it comes to wrestling. That being said, this movie is for horror movie smart marks. Right. Like it is pinpoint accurate with its laser focus on what it's going to hit hard and what it's going to gloss over. And while there are times that sells the movie very, very well, there are times where I think the movie kind of slips because of that. There are a couple scenes where they're so focused in on like that idea of just the hardcore horror fan following certain things, that certain parts that would sell the movie even better kind of get glassed over or shot real weird. One thing that comes to mind is during Operation Booby Trap, they've got all this really cool stuff set up, right? They've got the bear trap and they've got the antlers on the door and they've got a bunch of things like that. And while we get little bits of kind of how that all goes together, and I get they were working within this PG-13 rating or whatever, I wanted to see the girl's head get caught in the bear trap, right? Like I didn't just want it to be a joke, but I get why they did it, because that's not what they were after. They weren't trying to make like a gory horror film. It was just the comedy of that plan falling apart. Or the chaos of it even.
Well, the original rating was supposed to be R. I don't know if you know that. And that is actually why Taissa had signed on for it, because if you know, like everything that she's ever done is like R rated. So for her to do like a PG-13 movie is like super weird. And so she had originally signed on, it was R rating. And I don't know what changed from it, but then they decided that it was going to be PG-13. And I know that when they were editing it, they had like a really hard time trying to make it into this final product. And then finally they were like, okay, we're okay with it. And we're okay with it being PG-13.
But yeah, and so that may be why, there may be an R-rated cut of this out there where, like I said, that scene had a lot of potential to not just suddenly just be about, like the plan. And I get it. Like there, I see that what they gave us was what they wanted to, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit more out of that particular scene. It like the camera work started to get at times cool, at times kind of chaotic, but we got just fragments of what could have been really cool things. And I think it's because, I'm more willing to call this a comedy horror than a horror comedy, because I definitely feel like it leans more into that than the horror angle. So I think that, like I said, that laser focus at the Smart Mark horror fan, both benefits and is a couple of, demerits on this movie.
I'm kind of with you there, because this movie has a tendency to always go for the laugh. And what sucks about that is that because this is such a good slasher, you do feel gypped when you don't get that like gore payoff. The problem with that is that the humor lands every single time, because it is a really good comedy.
Yes.
So it's kind of one of these things where like its insistence on being so good on all fronts kind of damages it in a way. It's it's kind of weird, because I hadn't thought about that until you brought this up. I would like to see some gore.
Right.
Because we don't really get any, and quite frankly, I hadn't even realized it until you brought it up. It's almost like the original Halloween in that way.
Yeah, like
Where
there's not even
you don't
like
realize that there's no gore in that first Halloween until someone tells you. You always think of it as a brutal movie. Or the original Texas Chainsaw, there's no gore in the original Texas Chainsaw. Toby Hooper was going for a PG rating. Like, that's fucking insane, right?
I mean,
that
like
going for a PG rating.
He hops down off all those antlers on the door, and then they show the antlers, and they're all still perfectly clean, right? Like, just give me a little bit more. But like I said, it's one of those things where you look at everything that we're given, and you're right. Maybe we're just kind of expecting it to be perfect on all fronts, or they were trying to be. But I think that one thing that we can definitely agree on is that where this movie sticks to landing without a doubt is the cast. The characters that were given in this movie they're very purposefully, they're stock characters that you would get in a slasher movie and a horror movie. So some of them are, your stock ones that you're used to. A couple of them are some brand new things. So how does this like Breakfast Club of bringing all of these different types of characters together work for you? And is there anybody that you're like, that one is a character that I love? Lisa, let's stick with you going first.
I mean, I don't know. So, I mean, I've seen a lot of these different people in different things. So it's, I feel like for me, the first thing I ever saw Nina Dobrev in was Vampire Diaries, so she was Elena Gilbert on Vampire Diaries. And so to see her in that kind of like supernaturally, like kind of dark something wasn't so different, but her character was very different in the sense of like, I'm a little bit more of like a mean girl as opposed to this shy, innocent person, but she's still that strong character, which I really liked about her in this movie. She was this strong character, and there are moments where it's like she does have like this I'm not sure of myself, and like I am gonna die, this kind of sucks, like oh my gosh kind of moment, but she still plays it really well. And then you've got Adam Devine, who's just like hilarious in everything that he does, right? Like I assure you, probably they were just like, here, this is the storyline, just improv it,
Adam Devine, very much like Ryan Reynolds, just continuously plays different degrees of the same character, but it always manages to fit. Like no matter, like he's always perfectly cast as just playing the dude from Workaholics, maybe just turn it down some, right?
Right. And it's so funny because you said it earlier, like he is such a dick in this movie. Like he is so incredibly terrible. But man, you kind of like him, like he's a dick, but you're like, all right, yeah, you're kind of funny. But then like, you kind of are still rooting for them to not die. And Thaisa was of course phenomenal. And you have Malin Ackerman, who's just first of all, let's just say the woman is gorgeous.
Oh,
Like
well,
the
yeah.
oh my god,
Yes.
like the woman is beautiful. And then she comes out and she's just like so well, like her character's so well done. I think, you know, you have like this perfect balance of like it being like this is her mom but it's not her mom, and so she's kind of playing that like I don't really know what side you're seeing. Like you almost want to believe that is Thaisa's mom in the movie, you know, and Thaisa was just phenomenal in every single thing. So I mean, they're standouts. I think Thaisa, just that moment of like she sees her mom in the film, in when they're in the van and they're going to the camp, and she turns around and she just has tears in her eyes because it's the first time she's seen her in 3 years. That hit me. I was like, man, that seems so raw, so real, you know. So yeah.
Dave?
One character that always stands out to me, and she makes me laugh so much, is Angela
Tina?
Trimber as Tina.
Yeah.
She is just
she-
hysterical.
She damn near stole the movie.
She did, yeah. That's that strip tease she does, you know, and she lifts the bikini top with the la 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 la. It's just so damn funny. She plays that character so well because she does, you know, put on some of that airheadedness
Mhm.
that we are used to in that role, but she also turns up the charm. Like she makes her such a likable character, which we don't usually see in these kinds of movies. We don't normally see the, you know, the airhead who's really just wanting to, you know, get some dick over summer, you know, and she's not portrayed as the person who has heart. The one with heart is the, you know, the virginal girl, the final girl,
Right.
the one who's going to survive, right? So to see her get that sort of you know, a character where she's like she's a really sweet girl, you know. I really like that. The other character that I absolutely love because I see myself in him is Thomas Middleditch as Duncan.
I adore Thomas Middleditch. Like it
He's
made me just,
hysterical.
I mean, just it was still, because of Silicon Valley, but
Yeah.
like, just man, like as soon as he showed up, I was like, okay, yeah, I'd forgotten he would like, I'd seen him and I forgot he was in there, and then I was just like, it was a whole new level of happy. I was like, all right, yes, great.
Yeah, he's for me, he was one of those guys where I was like, that's me. Like I would geek out if I met someone who was even related to horror royalty.
Could you
You know?
could you just zing me just one time?
Yeah. Oh my god, that was so
The
good.
writing's so bad. like the fact that he got to that he got to live that moment and enjoyed like he knew it was going to be bad and that was the pleasure for him. Perfect. Loved it.
Yeah, he gets it. He loves it. Like this is his life. You know, the fact that he proudly calls himself and his friends the Bathmaticians, you know. Like there is there's a degree of nerdy there that if you yourself are not a nerd, you don't really appreciate. And I really see myself in him. I typically see myself in the flawed characters in movies. They're typically the ones that die. I don't see myself as a very heroic individual. I am the guy who would sit there snot-nosed crying, hoping that I make it through. I'm not a I'm gonna survive the zombie apocalypse guy. I just know it's not gonna happen.
Right. Well,
So-
I mean, and he essentially got to live Randy from Scream's like wet dream.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's exactly what it was.
He got to be Randy 2.0, like bigger, better, uncut type thing.
And he also serves the purpose of like really making for real the horror that everyone is going to be living through, because he's like, hey guys, it doesn't matter, we're not in this movie, he's not here to hurt us,
Right.
and then whack, he gets a machete thrown at his abdomen, and then he's just like fuck, and then dies, you know. And then later he's like, I'm not dead, you know. It's just so great, absolutely amazing. And then the fact that they wake up all together again at the hospital is just brilliant. And we'll get to the hospital scene.
Yeah.
But man, those two characters for me are like every single person's great in this, and particularly the real world transplants coming into the movie
Yes.
world. They are the standouts for me. Like I've loved Alia Shawkat from
It's
her
Arrested Development.
yeah.
days. I mean, she
Gertie on film here, maybe in my heart, like
yeah,
always and forever.
she's a scene stealer anywhere she goes. And one guy that I think doesn't get enough credit because he plays the character like because he's a really good looking dude and you expect him to be an asshole, but he never turns into the asshole. He's just like a good guy, and believably so. The guy that plays Chris,
Yeah,
Alexander
like
Ludwig.
I kept waiting for the asshole turn.
Right.
Like,
I was like, they're
he's
gonna
like
pull
a nice
a
guy.
scream.
Yeah.
They're gonna pull a
Yes.
scream. He's gonna be bad, and like that's what's gonna happen. But I actually think I mean, speaking of International Women's Day and allies, like that man for real was like, I'm gonna support you. I'm gonna show vulnerability. And there's like a moment when he says, when they ask how he's feeling, he says, "I'm scared," and I just thought that was so raw. Like it was just so real. It was. Yes, you're absolutely right, Dave. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, just everybody in this played their part so perfectly, especially when a movie is based on everyone fulfilling a certain part, which to an extent I think makes it harder because when you're just tossed into a movie and your character is just one of the stereotypes, you just got to play that character. But when the point of the character is to be the stereotype, I can only imagine that that's going to be harder, especially when you then have to become somebody who either has to become better than that stereotype or somebody who's trying to educate someone else about how they are, while also, like you get Nina Dobrev paired with the rocker chick. I can all of a sudden
Paula, right?
Yeah. And also with Tina, and it's like, oh, okay, like you're both the hot ones, right? But then but she's the hot one who's trying to survive, and she's the hot one who's just worried about the next time she's going to take her top off. But they kind of make each other better, right? Like she's more relaxed until she eats a whole bottle of Adderall, and
I got this.
It's just like everybody took that part of the movie and just and made the absolute most of it. And I was always surprised, like even the people who just didn't get a lot of screen time. I mean, Paula's only in the movie for like 3.5-4 minutes before they jump in the car and she crashes it. Right. I mean,
but what a death, right?
But yes,
Yeah.
Just such a great moment there. And then the guy with the suspenders who
Blake?
Yeah, Blake,
Yes.
who ends up, kind of being a love interest with Gertie or whatever. He was so funny because like he was the one guy who like never seemed to fully comprehend exactly what was going on, but he was just along for the ride. Like that's what everybody
He
else
was just
doing.
happy to be there.
Yeah,
He was me.
But I love the moment when he's like, so this isn't real, and they're like, no, it's not, and he goes, is New Wave real?
Right.
like that's what he's concerned about. It's like, no, but this nerd character is like really into New Wave. I need to know that New Wave is real.
Friend of the podcast, Frank Kowalski
Explodes in
she
style.
explodes in style, and that she does.
Yes. She absolutely does.
Definitely in style.
But yeah, so I think I don't know that there's really anybody who stands out here because I think that everybody does an equally good job of taking their stereotype to the next level, whether it be the 80s counselors who have to learn to live beyond that, or the modern day people who have to accept that they are one of those stereotypes and then choose to make it to be more than that. So I don't know that there's any standouts, but I think that everybody did a spectacular job.
You know what's really interesting to me is like a character is only what its creator puts into it. And so characters can be one-dimensional, characters can be three-dimensional. And we do see characters that are pretty one-dimensional in this. Intentionally so. Like Adam Devine's character, Kurt, is very one-dimensional. Yeah. And he plays him that way. I think Paula is actually pretty one-dimensional. Her sole purpose is to be the final girl. And so I think that to get those characters out of the way pretty early is a really smart decision, like rhetorically, like to take these characters out, like as the writer. That's the really interesting thing, because when you have a character like Amanda, who, like, yes, she's the shy girl with the guitar and the clipboard, right? But the guitar and the clipboard can tell you something more about her, right? Why does she have the guitar? Why does she have the clipboard? There's obviously something to her character more than I was going to bang Kurt and then die. Right? Whereas Kurt, like, the only reason the character exists is to have sex, is to literally provide the tool to kill the women that are going to die in this movie.
They're
right?
too busy. What does he say about the guys' dads? Oh, no, gay guys can't have kids. They're too busy going to discos and having sex, which, I mean, it's a pretty sweet life, I guess.
Oh man, what a great fucking line. So to see these characters work through the situation that they're in with the limited scope of actual character development that they can have is really, really interesting, because Tina doesn't have the depth, the range in her character that Amanda does, right? Because Tina's sole purpose in the movie is to take her top off.
Right.
And so, like, the Adderall doesn't really do much to change Operation Booby Trap, because all they have to do is give her the go-ahead.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, now is time. Oh, fantastic. And then here comes, Warren's cherry pie. And now we're taking our top off. Right. Whereas, again, I go back to the fact that, shy girl doesn't necessarily mean that she doesn't have more going on, just that it's not on the surface. And the clipboard and the guitar, like, she can be a leader. Right. The person with the clipboard is the person you look towards when there's a problem. Right. And the guitar implies that there's some sort of, like, creativity there in her, right? And creativity would, to me, lead me to believe that you're a problem solver, right? So, or something along those lines. I don't know that logic necessarily follows outside of my head, but to me, there's something to her that the other characters don't have. Just like Blake, he's not really a very well-defined character. And it's part of the reason why he lives as long as he does, because he doesn't serve one particular purpose in the movie, right? I mean, if we're looking at this realistically, and this is an 80s slasher, the purpose he serves is for diversity, right?
Yeah.
He's the token character, right? But there's more to him, because he's not defined, and so his character is allowed to accept this situation that he's in, and he plays that beautifully. I think that there's so much depth to that, and the characters each, whether they are supposed to play a one-dimensional character or a three-dimensional character or an infinitely dimensional character, like, that is something that I think the movie nailed on such a, like, a microcosmic level, but is really cool when you start looking at it.
Also, just quick side note, did you realize that the actress who plays Paul, Chloe Bridges, I believe is her name, her and Adam Devine are married in real life?
They actually met on that set.
Oh, is that where they met?
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
Like,
that I didn't know.
Trying to figure out, like, where we knew her from, and I was like, oh my god, it's Adam Devine's real wife.
Yeah, they actually met on that set, which I think is, like, super cute. So
yeah.
All right,
there you go. So one of the other things that I think this movie does really well, and I kind of mentioned this, is the story aspect of this, right? This is not unique, this idea that you can jump into a movie or, being something metafictional, but you have two stories here that kind of represent that, like, tale old as time kind of storytelling, right? We have that traditional summer camp slasher, right? Friday the 13th, sleepaway camp. I mean, there's no shortage of summer camp based slashers, right? The Burning,
Fear Street just did one.
Madman, Fear Street. I mean, we could go on, right? I can't think of any more right now, but I'm sure we could. If we search the internet, we could go on. And if you gave me another minute, I could probably come up with another one. So like that's classic in the slasher genre. And so is the mother-daughter reconnection story. I mean, that's been told, upwards and downwards, sideways, 100 million different times and in different ways. And I think that this movie manages to have each of those things done independently and bring them together for something that's a whole new experience, right? So my question then, I'm going to keep throwing it back to you, Lisa, is how do they function on their own, these two different stories, right? And how do they interact to create this kind of new experience?
Oh, good question, Dave. Well, I think, I don't know, it's interesting because there's a lot of things that you do the slasher situation of, very Friday the 13th. I mean, even the songs that they're singing around, like, the Kumbaya situation. Oh my gosh, Kumbaya, no.
They're
Oh,
literally
I love
singing
it.
Kumbaya. Yeah.
So good. But you get that. I mean, you even get like their outfits. It's so Friday the 13th, right? But the fact that you put people in a high pressure situation of like a slumber party kind of thing where people join, like make these bonds, it kind of works really well to then further build the bond with the mother and the daughter, right? So like the whole thing is I want to save my mom, right? It's not like just I'm reconnecting. It's I want to save my mom, and I don't just want to save her. I want to bring her back with me, So when she's saying like I can bring you back, and Nancy's Amanda Nancy, however you want to refer to her as, she's saying like, oh, I could go to college, I could be this, I could do that, I could go shopping at a mall. And then she's like, well, no, we do shopping online. She's like, what is that? She's like, never mind, I made it up.
I love that line.
Yeah, it's so good. She's like, I don't have time to get into this.
Yeah.
So, like those kind of things of like, it takes it to that extra level of not just, I want to reconnect with my mom. It's that I want to save my mom, but it's not just that. It's the sense of, I'm letting go of my mom, right? So I think that is really such a big thing where she has to accept that, her mom is gone. Like, and she gets that closure. She gets to say, I love you to her mom, and it's that closure. It's the sense of like, it gave her that final push of like, okay, I can kind of move on now. A lot of her relationships had been broken. She was best friends with Vicky, and then everything happened with her mom and she's no longer friends with this girl. And so it really wasn't just about the mom. I think it was about making connections just with all the people. And I think just that having it as a slasher film where people could possibly die made it the perfect medium for it to happen. Like it just kind of was like, we're going to speed this up. Kind of like how you get a Disney movie and you kill off a parent to make the, kid grow up faster. Very similar,
Yeah, I think that when you're talking about the mother-daughter storyline, the element of it that gets twisted up here that makes this something new and interesting is that idea of only one of the people in the mother-daughter reconnection story is actually trying to reconnect.
Yeah.
Right? Like this isn't two estranged individuals that are now trying, both coming to terms with their flaws and meeting in the middle. This is one person who's completely unaware of what they mean to the other person. And because she's not actually, her mom, like she is, but she isn't, that whole thing. But to her, this is just some girl that she's just met. So you watch what Malin Ackerman did so amazingly in this role was you watched her pick up on the subtleties of the way that Max was interacting with her. And while she, not until the very end did she kind of outright say it, but you watched her become very aware of the fact that even though she didn't understand why, she knew that she meant something to this girl.
Yeah.
And the subtlety of the acting in that aspect was incredible. And that's kind of where that element of the story got taken somewhere else, especially when you've got the other people telling, you've got Vicky being like, that's not your mom, that's not your mom, these people aren't real, that's not your mom, like just being shoved down her throat constantly. But to her, it didn't matter. She knew that wasn't her mom, but also, yeah, that's her mom. And like, I haven't seen her in 3 years. It's when we did Hereditary, I talked about the fact that there was an underlying current in the movie Hereditary that just grief is a bitch, right? And you get that to a much less extreme here. While we're watching Max deal with her grief, she agrees to go to the movie, but only because the dude's going to do her homework. She's not going to do the Q&A because that's not something she's ready to face yet. But then when she actually does have to face it, and she kind of does have to take this grief head on, she is fortunate enough to have, a face to do this with. Whereas in Hereditary, it was just the mom like dealing with like the idea of her daughter still existing. So, but it really goes to show that, yeah, everybody's always saying this isn't your mom, but she needed that. And her grief made it to where, even though this was physically her mom, it was not mentally her mom, but the surrogate that this actress was providing in this moment was plenty for her. And closure is the word that Lisa used, and it's perfect. She didn't get that because, I mean, honestly, the scariest, like the most jarring moment in this film for me was the car accident at the very beginning. Like that was probably the one scare that I got, because that kind of came out of nowhere. Like, and for it all to just end like that is something that I can't even imagine. So to get any sort of closure has got to be great. So I think that's where that particular storyline kind of gets turned on its head and made into something new. The slasher thing, and they just had fun with that. And the story that they told with that was good. It was better than some of the other slasher stories. It's better than the story in Texas Chainsaw Massacre last week, right? Yeah. Because there is growth and development within those characters. The only problem I had with the slasher element of this story is by Act 3, I felt that there were so many things that they kind of kept hitting on, like reminding you that these are tropes so much, that by Act 3 of the movie, it was like, now you're kind of starting to fall victim to those things that you open this movie making fun of.
I get exactly what you mean. And maybe this isn't what comes to mind when you're thinking it, but like there's one scene, and it always pisses me off in every scary movie, anything, right? It's like, oh, the villain is down, the bad guy's down, but instead of actually making sure that he is dead and that we are good, we're just gonna run away. And I'm like, seriously, guys, like this could have ended this movie. Yeah. Like how many times, Gertie and Blake kissing instead of like, going to make sure that this dude is dead. Like how many times does that have to happen? Like, yes, I totally feel you in that sense. It was like, all right, cool, you're just making the story longer now for the sense of making the story longer,
right? And so that is one of the major faults of this for me, is in this movie. It's just the fact that we're presented so often with the fact that this is making fun of and making tropes better, but by the end of the movie, it's definitely falling victim to some of those things that it's been satirizing the entire time.
Yeah.
See, I saw that a little differently, and I'm gonna have to do a very infrequent disagreement with Daniel here. Daniel and I are usually on the same page. I think in the same way that the characters from the real world are affecting the characters in the movie world, the characters in the movie world are rubbing off on the characters in the real world. And we see some of that because they do behave just as stupidly sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. Because we see that in Duncan. Duncan's like, oh, don't worry, nothing's gonna happen to me. Like he feels safe, right? Even though he knows there's danger, right? How many times in the original Friday the 13th does Ralph warn everyone? You're getting into trouble if you go over that way, right? Like he knows there's trouble. and yet he stands there and takes a fucking selfie, right?
Yeah.
You know, to me, there's a sense of like the stupidity of these characters is rubbing off on you too. So this idea where, like, in the real world, Gertie's a pretty assertive character,
Mm-hmm.
right? And pragmatic. Like, she would not, in the real world, I think, have sat there and looked at Blake and said, "Kiss me, you fool," you know. But in the movie world, where this unbelievable event is occurring, they start behaving kind of like the characters that they're trying to behave more, getting to behave more like real people.
You bring up a really good point, and you can actually see it too, specifically with Gertie. There's a point when they're picking up like wood for a fire or whatever, and she hears like a rustling in the woods, and she's like, "Let's get out of here." Like, that's a smart move, right? She's like, "All right, let's go." But then, like, literally just, after the montage where they're doing, the whole booby trap thing, then she's like, "Yeah, kiss me." So you're absolutely right. Yeah, definitely.
And I can see, when you put it that way, I can see it. I can see that. But it doesn't make it any less annoying.
No, and it may not, and I could be reading into this.
Right.
That might not be the reason why. It could just be that the writers of this movie were like, "Oh, this is where they kiss."
Right. And so,
You know,
but
it very well could be.
but as we talk about the story, I think there's one of the main things that we can't walk away from. I honestly, I suggested this one just because I kind of knew what it was, and it was called The Final Girls, so I figured it would be great for this International Women's Day episode. But what we're presented here is a cast of badass women, from the ones in the movie that grow into being something more, from the ones in the real world who rise above themselves when put into this insane situation. So when you're just looking at the stereotypes that are kind of assigned to them, either by the movie or the movie in the movie, how do they take those ideas and then make them better to create very memorable characters, Lisa?
So I think that the first thing that comes to mind is definitely Paula being the original, the final girl, right? So she's the one that's supposed to be, the final girl. And she comes in and she's like this badass girl, right? She comes in, she's got these, army boots, and she's like, smoking. She's all like, "I'm Mrs. Cool," right?
Marlboro Reds.
Yeah.
Yeah. The real deal.
Yeah.
So, you get her and you're like,
No
yeah,
Pall
of
Malls
course.
for her.
No. You get her and you think like, okay, of course she's the final girl, right? Like, she's such a badass. But then she dies within like 5 minutes, So I really like the idea of the fact that Max is so incredibly vulnerable and so fragile in from the beginning of like the moment she gets into the film, where you see that growth within her, and you don't need to be like this stereotypical badass chick. Like, she's badass just because she continues to go on, right? Like, that for me, I think, is one of the strongest things. It's not all about like how physically strong you are, because you get this dude, Chris, that's like this, very strong looking man, and he's the one that's the most vulnerable person on that entire movie. So it's not about brawn, it's about more just who you are as a person, emotionally strong. And I think that counts so much more, and I think that's really what makes the difference between these women in this movie. They're all so different characters, like they're all so very individual, but also badass in their own way, because they continue to go on, they continue to fight. And so I think that's one of those things. I mean, even when you have Gertie and Vicky's character, when they are literally under the bookcase and they're telling these people, go on, where there's nothing that we're going to do, and they're sacrificing themselves, like, that's badass. Like, that is pure selflessness. And I just think that that's really what makes the difference. It's not about them, it's about the group as a whole. So there's a lot to go there, but I mean, I just think that for me, if I had to sum it up in something, it's about that. It's about being able to look at yourself and being able to accept what is there, what your actual strengths are, and what you can build on. So, yeah.
And I think that one of my favorite ones of taking the stereotype and turning it is in Tina. You get this, she what her opening line is like, I brought a bikini, a suntan lotion, and
And a
diaphragm, right?
diaphragm.
Yeah.
And so like she's the sex crazed one, and she's there to be the boobs and blood because it's an 80s slasher. What was awesome was watching her take control of that. And now she was still going to show her boobs because, damn it, she was going to show her boobs. But now she was doing it for the greater good.
Right.
And on the one hand, it's funny. But on the other hand, it's one of those things where it's like, you know what? If this is who I've got to be and this is what I've got to present to the world, right? Is Adderall driven, sex crazed striptease. Then I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it my damnedest. And
Yes.
I'm going to help save all of my friends by showing my titties.
Right.
And
That's
I
her
think-
strength.
And that's what we need more of in this world.
Yeah.
Women who are saving the world.
One boob at a time.
One boob at
You
a
know what? I'll
time.
take one boob at a time. Two boobs at a time. Better. But if what you've got for the world is one good boobie, then God damn it, let it out. If you got two good boobies, yes, we'll look at them and you can save the world with them. Ladies, if your boobs are going to save the world, then set them free. Free the nipple. Let's go.
Absolutely.
But that was such a cool moment. And then, Malin Ackerman got to do the same thing, right? She got to embrace this fact that her character was going to die for being sexy or having sex. And she did that to save and sacrificed herself by doing it, realizing that when it's called the final girl, the only way that works is if one of you is
Right.
the final girl.
Yeah.
And so she took what she's given, her creativity and, her sex appeal, and she used that for good, which, you normally don't do. It's normally a plot device, especially after Vicky looked at her and was like, you can't be the final girl. You're here to be part of the body count.
Yeah.
Like, to have somebody
That was a hard scene.
that was brutal.
Yeah.
And so to rise above that, but also, she was part of the body count, but she realized that if her place was to be part of the body count, that she was going to do it in a way that was going to provide the most help. And that's where it gets real cool, right? Vicky acknowledging, I'm the mean girl, and I've made it past the halfway point. I'm not long for this world. Like one of the things about Mean Girls is they don't know they're mean girls, right? Like, or they know but don't care. She was remorseful about the fact that she was a mean girl and was coming to and was facing these things. And so all of those stereotypes getting taken to that next level, like you were talking about, that was just huge.
For me, I mentioned that this is a movie that always makes me cry. And I'm a crybaby. I mean, there are very few. I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before. There are very few movies that I don't cry in.
Listen, we're not crybabies. We're just emotionally intelligent people. Okay.
Well,
But
my
you're
emotional
not stunted like me. It's okay.
Right.
my emotional intelligence is like Mensa
Same.
level intelligence, if that's the case. So
Mine's Neanderthal level.
In the very first scene of this movie, I think we get everything we need to know about the heroics of the strong female lead. And I think that first scene in the movie is a better example of what it means to be a strong woman than anything we see later in the movie when they're sucked into Camp Bloodbath. We see a woman who is providing for her daughter without compromising her own integrity and who she is. And we see a daughter who is doing for her mother what her mother can't do for her. self, right? And each one kind of giving to the other what the other needs. You know, uh, when Max is telling her, like, you know, but where's this money gonna come from? When she grabs those bills and she just throws them out the window as she's getting silly to Betty Davis Eyes, which, by the way, oh
Oh
my
my
god, what an
God.
incredible use of that song. And when it comes back at the end of the movie,
Yeah.
like that again, I get emotional because it's like, damn, like your mother was showing you at the beginning of the movie that it's okay, right? We'll be fine. And they're playing Betty Davis Eyes. And then again at the end of the movie, she's showing you you're going to be fine, right? I mean, she didn't sacrifice herself intentionally at the beginning of the movie, but it's definitely an intentional sacrifice at the end of the movie. And uh, the emotional awareness, you mentioned this, Daniel, earlier, the emotional awareness of these characters and how she's able to say, I know I mean something to you, but I don't know what it is.
Right.
But either way, I'm willing to mean that thing to you, right? I think that this plays to how brilliant an actress she really was in the movie,
Mhm.
right? Because within the movie, we see her unable to give up acting. Like, she needs to continue to act to be herself, right? And we see her in a role that's much more defined than any of the others, and we see her have this emotional awareness that the other characters don't have. And I think it's because Amanda, imbued this character with a little bit of herself.
Well, Max
Something.
even says that too, like, just, like, things that she says, like, "Let's rock and roll," right? Or,
Mhm.
"Oh, you must think I'm a total zero." Like, it's so, and I think that's
Yes.
the part that it makes it so hard for Max to differentiate one from the other,
Yeah.
because they are so well intertwined with each other.
And Amanda mentions earlier in the movie, she's like, oh, you know, I can't escape this movie. And yet it seems, you know, by all accounts, that she got closer to expressing herself as an actress in this one movie than she did in anything else. You know, I love this aspect of the movie. The fact that the mother is strong for the daughter and the daughter is strong for the mother, and each gives the other exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And that's more of a realistic badass woman than what we get later on in the movie, which is fantastic. I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned Tina. She rises to the occasion. She was like, I got to show my boobies to save you all. Fantastic. I'm showing them,
Done.
you know? Yeah. You know, it women rock.
Yeah.
They
So,
do.
well, the movie's definitely full of badass women. There's one badass dude that we've just got to discuss, and it's Billy Murphy. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about the deeper elements of this movie, the comedy elements, but it is also a slasher. So what we get here is Billy Murphy, who is really just Jason Voorhees, right? Well, you know, he's got the
Mhm.
goofy mask and all that, but he becomes more than that. So when you're looking at the kills and just Billy Murphy as a character, where does all that fit into how you feel about the movie, Lisa?
I think, and this is my only, not, I mean, this is one of my issues with the movie. The fact that he only comes out when people are getting freaky, like, that's never really, like,
Her.
addressed why, you know? Like, why is it only when people are just, like, you know, about to have a fun time that you're gonna be like, "Okay, now's my time to come kill them." So I think that's, I think, one of the only things where I'm like, "Alright, it makes for good movie, totally, but why?" So I feel like that bugs me that I don't know a better backstory to that. Like, is it just because they were camp counselors? But if they were just camp counselors, he would have killed them all earlier, you know? So that part for me kind of bugs me a little bit. But I do like his character a lot. And can I just say, I don't know how we haven't brought it up yet. The slow motion scene where he is jumping out the window. Oh my God. That for me was unbelievable. So I don't know if you know, that whole thing was originally supposed to be like 3 minutes long. And they were like, no, you got to cut it. And so they ended up cutting it to 1.5 minutes. And that's what you see.
It was 3 minutes of slow motion.
Yeah, it was 3 minutes of slow motion. And they were like, yeah, no, dude, we're not doing 3 minutes. And he was like, no, I won't cut it. But they did. They cut it down to 1.5 minutes. But so that for me is just beautiful. Like it's shot gorgeously. Like just that is
there are we haven't really talked about the director, but there are some really incredible shots here.
Oh my God, yes.
The one where they're getting the room ready for Operation Booby Trap, and the camera, like it's one seamless shot, and the camera pans from here to over there, and then it kind of like sweeps under the floor.
It does a lot of the sweeps and the sweeps and swoops, right?
Yeah, it sweeps and swoops. It's very actually like Martin Scorsese style.
Yeah,
just like kind of a little more grandiose and in your face about it. But you're right, like some of the cinematography here.
Oh my God,
really great,
gorgeous. Yeah, no, really, really. And that was one of the first things that I noticed actually when I was watching it. I was like, wow, this is just beautiful. So that scene of him chasing them when they are after, you know, Operation Booby Trap, I just think it gives so much on like him. It's just like, it's great. And you see more of his backstory, which you know, I mean, people suck, right? Like, what makes you think that throwing freaking like what are those things called? Firecrackers?
And they were like black
firecrackers.
cats.
Yeah, like throwing that is gonna like how. Let's be real for a sec. Like, that's not gonna make somebody like where's the logic there? You know, like people suck. But and then you see that in the faces of these people from in the flashback, you know, the real life people when they're watching this, and they're like, man, this freaking sucks. And there's nothing that they can do to stop that. So you really do feel for him in the sense of like, man, he just had a shitty situation. The homeboy was like bullied the entire time. I mean, it doesn't make it okay for you to go around killing people. You know, we've all had terrible situations in life, and we're not murderers that we know of. So like that for me is the only thing
that we know of.
well, we're willing to disclose.
There we go.
So that for me, I do feel for him, but I love it. I think it's fantastic the fact that he's getting his revenge on these people. I'll bet just a weird way of like, I'm just gonna wait for these people to get freaky in order to do it. So
yeah, I think that there are some. I mean, The Mask, right? Like,
ooh.
you know, when Friday the 13th, it's iconic that he's got the hockey mask, but it's 3 before he actually gets it, right?
Yeah, he's not in the first one,
right? And it's not in the first one. The second one is,
and in the second one, it's a sack. Yeah.
So you know, they knew what they were doing here, where they were like, okay, we're going to give him something iconic. The tiki mask is hilarious. Like it's funny. Especially to put it on somebody who the very first time he wore it, I think they said he killed 12 people, right? That original time. He definitely has the Voorhees strength and resiliency, if that's a word. He embodies all of those things with, you know, I don't know that he ever really rises too much above just kind of being a Jason Voorhees knockoff. I think that you're talking about the flashbacks. While there's some really great things with these, when you're drawing the direct line from this to Friday the 13th, one place that Friday the 13th does it so much better when you talk about the flashbacks is this suffered from Malin Ackerman telling that story and not having Betsy Palmer telling the story. Like Betsy Palmer telling the story of what happened to Jason is just, you know, one of those great things that you're never going to be able to touch. And so when you kind of recreate that scene, you can't help but draw those comparisons.
Yeah.
And so I think that they made him a Jason Voorhees light on purpose, and they gave us just enough of that. And he was fine. He definitely had some really, you know, just some good kills, like just squeezing like the head,
Yeah.
right, and like
That was
snapping
good.
stuff around.
Yeah.
He did some really great stuff, and I'm sorry, just killing. He didn't even kill Duncan the second time, but just when we're talking deaths, Duncan, like the fanatic, getting 2 deaths. Come on, that's awesome.
I know. Well, I mean, had it not been happening to him, he would have probably been like, "That's amazing," you know?
Exactly. But
Probably,
he got to live that moment.
Right.
I personally love Billy Murphy. And I'm a sucker for a good campfire story. And I think that Billy Murphy, as told, the Billy Murphy story, the legend as told by Malin Ackerman in this, is one of the best. It's up there with the way Jason's story is told in Friday the 13th. I think that it's up there with the way Crowley's story is told in The Burning. I think that it's up there with the Madman from Madman. You know, it's one of those like crazy good campfire stories that like scares you, because you end up thinking, is there something to this, right? Because like Gertie, like you hear that rustling of leaves and twigs and you're like, maybe we should walk away from here, right? But there's nowhere to go if you're in a summer camp. Like you have to stay, right? So I think that he's definitely up there for me in the great slasher killers. You know, as far as screen time goes, you can't compare him to a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees or, you know, anyone like that. But I've got a weird litmus test for whether or not I like a villain in a movie, particularly a horror movie. And the litmus test is, do I want the NECA toy company to make an action figure of this guy? Because you name it, and I've got an action figure for it if there is one.
Yeah.
You can see my bookshelf behind me.
Right.
For those of you that watch on YouTube and Facebook, it is lousy with horror action figures. Horror, primarily 80s horror and action. If there is a Schwarzenegger or Stallone action figure that has ever been released, it is back there. If there is a Jason Voorhees that has ever been released, it is back there. So that's my litmus test. I desperately want a Billy Murphy action figure to throw back there.
Yeah.
And for me, that says something. That says that there's something somewhat iconic about him. You know, are his kills as brutal and gory as we want them to be? No, I will give you that. The PG-13 rating, I think, took care of that and kind of puts an end to that brutality. We don't get that Rob Zombie Michael Myers. You know, we don't get the Jason Voorhees from the 2009 reboot here, right? We're getting a PG-13 version of Jason, and I think that's okay. But he has this like weird sense of humor that Jason also has, which is hard to give to your killers, right?
Yes.
Like Freddy's got that sense of humor. He has his own sense of humor. Chucky has his own sense of humor. And this is why these guys, I think, are so iconic, because their humor lands, because they are funny, right? Because you either are a funny villain that people can laugh with, or you're a totally emotionless killer that people are frightened of, like Michael Myers.
Right.
And I think that Billy Murphy has this sense of humor where like we see it in the way that the story in the flashback is being told, and he's just sitting there whittling that I don't know why that makes me laugh so hard. seeing him whittle that tiki mask, you know, as Malin Ackerman talks about how, you know, yeah, he took a whittling, and I was like, this fucking that's hysterical.
Yeah,
you know
arts and crafts,
why?
man.
You know, yeah, he turned into a regular, you know, arts and crafter. I'll take it. Arts and crafter.
Craftsman.
Arts and
craftsman.
An arts craftsman.
An
arts craftsman. He turned into a regular arts craftsman while he was in the hospital. You know, just, I don't know.
For me, it comes out in actually the kill with Duncan. You know, it's such like he's so toying with him, you know, and so like he's like, and Duncan, you know, poor guy, he's trying to get a selfie, right? So he's like, oh, he's not gonna kill us. I'm gonna take a selfie, and then he's like, oh, okay, no, wait, we're safe. He's not gonna kill me, and then he just, you know, Billy walks off, and then he's like, flabata, and then he just like kills him. Well, doesn't, but you know.
Yeah, I didn't. I'll credit where credit's due. I did forget about that one. Like the fact that he walked off like after he took the selfie, like to make him feel like he'd won,
right?
And then threw it back. There. Okay, yeah, there is something to that one that I didn't think about. Yeah, that one is really good. I did like that. I didn't think about him walking off.
Also waited for Blake to kiss Gertie.
Yes,
to skewer him.
Yeah,
you know.
Like, well, I think it's because of it's his code, right? So he was like, I couldn't kill him yet. He hadn't gotten freaky with anybody. But the moment he kisses Gertie, he's like, my time has come. I will now kill him.
But he breaks that.
The bar is on the floor for what that dude considers freaky.
He's like, whatever, bare minimum. Yeah, let's do it.
A church would consider that sexual. Now you die.
You didn't leave room for the Holy Spirit. Sorry.
No room for the Holy Spirit.
Oh my God.
Man, I was legit told that by someone at a Catholic school.
Many a time.
Yeah, Lisa and I went to Catholic elementary and middle school
and high school,
different Catholic high schools. And they didn't say that at my Catholic high school though.
No, they said it at mine, and we had a principal that had a floodlight and would stand at the top of the bleachers and just like aim it down at everybody and be like, nope.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, I miss that dude.
Well, so you know, we've talked all the characters, we've talked the kills. You know, we've talked some of the great moments, and we're going to get into rating, but just kind of a couple of things here that I took some notes on. Just kind of, I'll throw it out there for you guys too. Was there just anything else that you just loved about this movie that didn't really fit into any of the categories? Because I would be remiss if I did not talk about how genius I thought the idea of the fact that the people who came in from the real world could hear his music when he was getting close. Yeah. I loved that so much because that was just that perfect thing, right? Because as the viewer, you're always like, oh shit, it's about to go down. Because you hear that, right? And it's like, oh shit, yeah, let's go. And so the fact that when they were in the movie, like they could still hear those things, like, yeah, I thought it was funny. They had to like step over the words in the flashback and you see the credits roll. But hearing the fact that they could hear it when he was close, and like I said, it's just that I thought that was such a genius moment. It just didn't fit into any of the categories. So I was just
and I think it's interesting too when they go into the flashback the second time, how like Nancy's like, is that what I sound like? Is that my voice? So like like I just think like it was so funny that like, you know, now she's hearing it too, like and so I thought that was genius. Yes, definitely.
If there was any doubt in her mind that what they were saying was true,
right,
like that was washed away at that moment. And also like thinking, wow, we can teleport into the flashback because we saw this happen earlier, right? So like say the thing, you know, like that was absolutely brilliant. If mentioning things that like just didn't really fit into any one area, I do want to mention what I think is possibly like in the mountain, if we're doing Mount Geekmore's here, the mountain of horror movie endings. And it really only works if you have all the other horror movies that have come before, particularly Halloween 2, right?
Yes.
Because Halloween 2 picks up on the same night. It's the same Halloween, and the bulk of the action takes place inside Haddonfield Hospital, right? So for these actors to now, all of them, even the ones that have died, wake up and now they are inside this hospital with Max and with Chris, right? And it's like, wait, but how? Right? And you don't notice right away that, all the beeps and boops are coming from machines that are from the 1980s,
Right.
right? And then as soon as they peek around the corner, like the doctor's being just a little too frisky with the nurse,
And it
and
was the 80s.
exactly, right? And then here comes fucking Billy Murphy crashing through there, and then the Camp Bloodbath thing
Yes.
just flashes up there, and you're like, holy shit, they're in part 2. That's right. There was a double feature the night that they went into the movie. Like, that was, to me, it's one of the most brilliant endings, because it's like, no, you didn't survive. Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and also for one of the tells to be the fact that he spotted a can of Tab.
Yes. Oh my
Yes.
god. And the freaking gremlin.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Yeah, just like the quick shots of like, oh man, here's all the clues you missed real fast. Like, it's all
Right.
coming together. Like, that shit was, yeah, that was really funny. All right, so
Yeah.
there we go. So now we've all had that one extra moment. So it's that time of the show where we're going to get to where we rate the movie. Now, if you're new to Shiver, we always like to let you know, or remind you if you're not new, that we only rate a movie against itself. So we don't rate a movie in stars or something that just goes from movie to movie. We rate things only against themselves. So we come up with a unique rating system. And I think that there's one thing that we all established a little bit ago that was a great moment in the movie. And it was a moment that celebrated while also satirizing the 80s slasher, and that's the slow motion jump. So when we're going to look at this movie, I want to know, Lisa, out of a possible 90-second slow motion jumps, out of a possible 90-second slow motion jumps, what do you give The Final Girls?
I give it like a 4.25.
We're going to need you to go up or down one.
Ah, crap.
Up or down a
Well, I
quarter.
guess
We only do
We don't-
wholes and halves.
We don't math hard here.
It's the
Yeah.
ultimate thing, because you're gonna have to go either higher or lower than
All
you're
right,
thinking.
we'll go lower. We'll give it a 4 because there's always room for improvement.
Okay.
Fair enough. Dave?
I am going to go up to the 4.5. The only thing that would get this to a 5, the only area in which it's lacking, I think, is really committing to its horror movie love, and giving us some of those gory kills. Because you mentioned earlier, Daniel, like, you can be a horror comedy and still like be horror.
Like Idle Hands was.
Idle Hands is really funny and really gory. Possibly my favorite horror comedy. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, period, not just horror movies. Return of the Living Dead is like fucking leave you in stitches funny, and yet still really gory, so I think that we could have gotten some of that gore. I would have loved to have seen like Tina's head splat right open, when it got trapped in that bear trap. So there's just little things like that, but otherwise, I think that this movie is one of those that borders on perfection, because in almost every other way, it really does. It makes you laugh when it wants you to laugh. It makes you wince when it wants you to wince, and it makes you cry when it wants you to cry.
So I've been back and forth with this one a lot, and like I just revealed to Lisa, or like we always say, we don't do quarters, right? Because I feel like where I would sit most comfortably with this would be a 3.75, but I'm not going to do that. So I've been trying to figure out if I was going to go up or down. I think that the comedy aspects of this are done very well. I think the acting is all very good. It does leave some to be desired with the kills. I do think that the camera work is great when it's great. I think there's a couple times when it's not all that great, like when they're in the house that shows up in like the flashback the second time that Malin Ackerman had never seen.
Mm-hmm.
It's all maybe just a little bit too dark, and I kind of get it, but also So I've been back and forth, but one of the reasons that I do love doing this show is because when you do get a chance to kind of debrief on something like this, you're now face to face with either, the remembering that there was more about it that you liked or more about it that you didn't like. And there is more about it that I liked when I was thinking about this initially. And not that I ever disliked it, but I do think that the likes are going to outshine the dislikes. So I'm going to hit that 4 mark. I think that this is a huge recommend. I honestly can't think of anybody that I wouldn't tell to watch this movie, because even if you're like, I don't like scary things, this movie's not that scary. Right. So there's I can see we talked about how I think you said this is one of, if not Neary's like favorite scary movies, right? And I can see why, because it's definitely a scary movie, but it's not that scary and it's very funny. Like I can see that. So I honestly can't think of anybody I wouldn't recommend this to. So I'm just gonna hit that 4 because like Lisa said, there's room for improvement. There's a couple things I wish they'd done differently, but I think a 4 is a solid spot for it. So let's see, 4, 4, 8. We're at like 12.5 divided by 3.
It's 4.16 repeating, which I don't feel comfortable saying out loud on a horror podcast. So we're just gonna go 4.
We're just gonna go 4. So
4 stars.
4 slow motion,
90-second
slow motion jumps.
So there you have it. 4 90-second slow motion jumps. And I think that's okay. I think that this is right where the movie needs to be. For those of you that have stuck with us for the entire show, and as I see the counter of people here, it looks like most of you stuck with us for the whole show. So thank you very much. Particularly to Mr. Kowalski. Thanks for coming in and commenting. So we want to thank you. We also want to direct you to some of the other Geek Bro Network podcasts, shows like Better Let Me Tell You, shows like Dose of Ellie, Comedy Fitness, Kick Flicks, our sister podcast, Crimacopia, Seasoned, a TV podcast, What's Up Bro, and Mount Geekmore, where you can find Daniel and myself ranting and raving about the top 4 of a geek subject for that week.
Ranting and raving is really the best way to put it.
I think so.
Honest to God, yeah. I don't think there are 2 better words that describe what we do over on Geekmore.
And you can find all these where, Daniel?
If you head to geekbro.net, you can find all of those. If you're looking for us specifically, you can find us at shiverpod.com, or we are on all social media as @shiverpod. Feel free to reach out to us on any of those. We released our schedule last week for what we're going to be doing in the month of March. And usually on Mondays, I try to remind everybody what's coming up that week, give you a little lead time on watching that movie. And next week, we are going to get into that very rare moment where it's a movie that Dave and I will both be watching for the first time, as we are going to be celebrating St. Patrick's Day next week with what has been described to me as a twisted Irish fairy tale of a movie called The Hallow. It came out in the same year as this, actually, in 2015. It's going to be new to both of us, and the numbers on it are good, so I'm excited to give it a go.
Absolutely.
So make sure that you head to shiverpod.com, where you can check out all of that. And like I said, you'll get the release calendar. We try to do all of those. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm just happy to be included. So, yeah.
Well, not because you're my sister, but I did enjoy you being here.
Aw, thanks, Dave.
You were great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.